Hi, I'm Jen, and this is my first knitting vlog. I used to sewing vlog like a really long time ago, and I don't intend this to become a regular thing, but I always think it's fun to look at what I've done over the past year, and since I've done a whole lot more knitting than sewing over the past year, that I might share with you what I made in 2024. So I'm going to go in order of all the projects that I finished from when I finished them. I knit around 20 items this year. The fastest garment that I knit, so I'm not counting socks or accessories, was 9 days, and the longest one was 8 months. So definitely a range in what I am able to knit depending on the project and also just my motivation, other external factors like what I'm doing, what I'm been busy with. I would not say I'm very consistent at all in my speed, but I'm really proud of what I made this year, so I wanted to share that with you. I'm going to be referencing my Ravelry for all my notes about my items, but let's get started. So the first item is actually a project I carried over from 2023. I started it in November and I finished it in January. This is the Barbaro blouse from Knitting for Olive. I knit it in their pure silk. It does call for their wool, although they often say that their yarns are interchangeable. Because I knit it in silk instead of wool, I wound up going down a needle size because the silk isn't as elastic, so I knit it on a US 2, and I knit a short sleeve version, which required me to chart the sleeves entirely. I just did it in Excel, and that helped me to understand where I needed to start knitting the sleeve because the whole thing is knit bottom up. If I were to knit it again, which I would knit it a little bit longer. I did crop the body by about 2 repeats, and I think that it was already cropped enough. So I could, and I probably will, go back and cast on and then graft to make it a little bit longer, but I just haven't gotten around to it yet. I did really enjoy knitting it. I have some handmade glass buttons that I got off Etsy for the back of the neck. I just think it's so pretty. I fell in love with it the first time I saw the picture, and I waited ages for the pattern to be released in English. I did wind up buying their book in order to knit this pattern. I've knit the sleeves a second time, actually, because my best friend knit the pattern as well. She knit the long sleeve version, and I offered to knit the sleeves for her because she offered to give me her leftover yarn. So I have knit the sleeves for this twice, and I have lots of notes about it in my Ravelry page. Some people do seem to be confused by the sleeve increases, and I'll agree it's tricky because you wind up kind of having to interrupt and do half of a lace pattern for a while you're adding increases. This is a trickier lace pattern because every row is a different number of stitches. So that makes getting gauge or counting your gauge tricky because they give you a number of stitches, but you're not, depending on where you are in the lace pattern, you will be counting a different number of stitches. The helpful thing I found, it's not in the book, but on the Ravelry page, they do have a number of repeats per inches, and that's much easier because there are these strong vertical bars in the repeat, and you can just measure between those bars, and even though any which row will have a different number of stitches, you know the repeat of the shell lace pattern. So I'm very happy with this one. I love to wear it to work, and I always get lots of compliments on it, so very happy with that. The next item I knit in 1 month, and this is a lace design I designed myself. This was my first foray into really designing my own knitwear. It has these really long pointed sleeves. That's why I've called this the Pointed Opinions blouse. It's a pattern I am working on releasing. I just really got in my head about the set-in sleeves and grading them for different sizes and lace, so I'm still working on that, but it is something I plan to release probably this year and knit another sample in. This is knit in Knitting for Olive Cotton Merino, which I just adore. It is so silky, so soft, so drapey, and just a yarn I really enjoyed working with. I knit this on US 4 needles, and it has 2 lace patterns. This is called a horseshoe lace on the sleeve and an arrowhead lace on the bodice, and I just did a modification to the arrowhead lace over the bust to make it a little bit more opaque so that I can feel comfortable wearing this alone over a bra. It also looks cute under a dress, over a turtleneck. It has a wide neck with a picot cast off, which I'm going to pick up or take out and redo with crochet. I think it's rolling a little bit too much with the knit picot, so I'm just going to replace it with a crochet picot. But that is this, so stay tuned maybe for more with this, but I really enjoyed knitting this. I flew off my needles in just a month. It was so much fun. I would be knitting it, and it's almost like when you're driving somewhere you've been a lot of times and you kind of don't remember getting there. I would be knitting this and be on like row 1 of the lace pattern and then all of a sudden I would be on row 1 again. I did remember getting through rows, 2, 3, 4. It just was really rhythmic and enjoyable to knit. So this next one was another holdover from 2023. I started it in December and I finished it in March. This is the Gingerbread Sweater by East-Base Tricot, and I knit it in 2 hand-dyed indie yarns. The base is Vixen from Little Fox Yarns, which is a silk wool blend, and then Dye Mad Yarns mohair in the color Opal. So I held those together. It's a little bit short again because I ran out of the Opal. I just didn't have quite enough to make it quite as long, but it still hits the top of my jeans. It just rides up when I'm like bending over or whatever. It was a good sweater pattern to follow. I changed it to have 2x2 ribbing on the cuff and the hem. I was a little bit disappointed in the mohair because I found it very uneven throughout the skein. The outer part of the skein had a lot more dye on it than the inner part, so I wound up kind of like winding it into several balls and using different balls in different areas, so it almost has a bit of a gradient effect where there's more color in the variation in the bottom of the sweater than the top of the sweater, and because of how the mohair was. But other than that, I'm very happy with this. I wear it all the time. It's so easy to throw on and very soft, of course, from the mohair. The next pattern that I finished, I did start it in October 2023 and I finished it in April. I did take a break for a while there to work on some other things, but this is the Saguaro Sweater by Camille K. And this is knit in 2 strands of Rowan Kid Silk mohair held together. They're actually 2 different colors of the Kid Silk mohair. It's Bluebell and Bill. And the reason that I held this together was I was trying to make this match exactly a silk fabric that I had, because I knit this for my best friend's wedding. So she got married on the side of a mountain in Canada, in Banff, Canada, on October 1st. And we were thinking, well, it could be warm or it could be cold. And it turned out to be snowing 6 inches. So I'm glad that I had knit a sweater, but the thought was I would knit a sweater to identically match a dress that I would also sew, and then I also wound up adding some accessories to my ensemble. So I wore this underneath a dress. The Pauline dress from Closet Core Patterns was the bodice, which is a high and square neck, so it really lined up nicely with the puff sleeves coming out, and I was very pleasantly warm despite the about 6 inches of snow that wound up accumulating during the wedding. So I'm very glad to have had this, and now to have it in my wardrobe. I wound up sewing a skirt out of the leftover fabric, so now I have kind of a whole set that I can wear in this matching color. It's very soft. I quite like the Rowan Kid Silk mohair, and I very much enjoyed this pattern too. It's a very cute pattern. I see the inspiration. The name comes from a saguaro cactus, and I of course am from Arizona, so I kind of want to knit this again in green so that it can be truly my cactus sweater. The next thing that I knit this year, I don't actually have anymore because they were a gift knit. I knit a pair of scrappy socks for a friend as part of a gift exchange, and I knit them in just about a week. I started them in April, and at the end of April finished them at the beginning of May. That was the Weekend Shorty Socks by Summer Lee was the pattern that I knit, and that pattern, I just wanted to talk about it because it reinvigorated my love for socks. I used to actually work in a hosiery factory here in North Carolina, and so I used to be very involved in socks, and I have a large collection of socks that were either knitted on industrial sock machines by me or by my coworkers, and so I really do love socks, but the first time I knit them by hand, I hated it. The first sock took me a month, and the second sock took me a year, and I was like, I'm never doing this again. And so I did decide to pick it back up for a friend, and when I did that, I knit it 2 at a time. And learning to knit 2 at a time changed my life. It just really kept the motivation there for me, and I learned how to enjoy more knitting socks, as well as upgrading from I was using bamboo wooden needles the first time I knit socks, DPNs, to knitting on Chiaothu fixed in Magic Loop. It was just a big improvement in my knitting experience, so I wanted to mention them because I knit a lot more socks this year simply because of those. So the next item that I finished, I started in March and I finished in May, and that is the Ophelia blouse from Starcross Knits. I knit this in Knitting for Olive Pure Silk, which is the recommended yarn in the pattern. And I really like it. I submitted this to North Carolina State Fair in the garment category, and I won a blue ribbon. And yeah, it's silk. So it's really great in the summertime. I do wear it on its own on the weekends with skin poking through the front, and I also have a undershirt that kind of follows the neckline almost exactly that I wear it over for work. So it's very versatile like that. It's meant to be close fitting. It has these darts as well as waist shaping, so it's very cute on. I love the lace detail around the outside and the picot crochet border. A couple things that I didn't like about the pattern mainly was the gauge, and that's for two reasons. The first one is totally my personal opinion. 24 stitches per 4 inches in this yarn, Knitting for Olive Pure Silk, is much too loose for my tastes. I do prefer a tighter gauge myself, but just 24 stitches was really pushing it, especially in a yarn that doesn't bloom at all. So I wound up more closer to 28 stitches per 4 inches in my gauge, and I just made modifications, adding more increases and such to get it to fit me better. The second part about the gauge, though, was I don't think that it's a very achievable gauge. The pattern calls for that gauge on 2mm needles, which is very small needles. And the Knitting for Olive Pure Silk, actually the gauge on the ball band is 28 stitches per inch on US 2.5 needles. So for a smaller needle to have such a larger gauge, I don't think is really achievable for a lot of people. I wound up doing a mega swatch where I swatched basically all my needles from US 2 to US 6 in order to find where I was happy with my knitting, and I was happiest at about that 28 stitches per inch. I found kind of like the loosest possible fabric that I would be happy with, and that was what I went with. But to get 24 stitches per 4 inches on a US 2 needle, it just doesn't seem, it didn't make sense in my head. I actually wound up hitting that on a US 6, which is what I would expect. That's what I knit things that are like fingering plus mohair. On a US 6, I get about 24 stitches per inch, so that was kind of an unusual gauge for me. But I'm very happy with the garment in the end. I think that Starcross Knits, her patterns are so cute, her style and her fashion and her inspiration just really hits. She's got a lot of really cute stuff. But the gauge didn't quite make sense to me on this one. But I really am happy with the garment I got in the end. The one thing I will say about the yarn, this was my second time, obviously, working with the Knitting for Olive Pure Silk, and these balls of yarn had so much plastic in them. Like, there were literally pieces of plastic. It looked like plastic bags or something had gotten sucked up in the spinning process, and I was pulling chunks of plastic spun into the yarn, the same way that you might find vegetable matter in a really rustic wool yarn. It was quite confusing. I know that plastic gets in natural fibers, usually from like plastic bags blowing into fields, but it wasn't something I expected to find as much in silk yarn, and for there to be quite so much of it in the yarn, especially when I had knit a whole sweater with the yarn before and I didn't find any of it. So that was really weird and unpleasant. I spent a lot of time picking plastic out of the yarn, but no plastic in it now, so I'm very happy with it in the end. I did choose some abalone shell buttons for the sweater, because I'm not a fan of plastic buttons either. So that is the Ophelia blouse. The next two items that I knit with leftover yarn from my Swaro sweater. You can see these mittens. I knit them in just a couple days, and I used the same stitch pattern as the Swaro sweater, and I just improvised a mitten pattern, knowing what my gauge was. So I wore these at the wedding, and they came in handy. They kept my hands nice and warm, so that was just a fun little accessory that I knit. And those only took me a couple days. I did hold the same two yarns together, but then I took just one of the yarns. So you can kind of see they're a little bit different tone. This one is brighter than this one because this is just one yarn. But this is called the Ice Queen Cowl by Romy Hill, and it is an all-over lace openwork cowl with a beautiful scalloped border and beads. So these are Miyuki triangle beads. It's just a clear AB Aurora Borealis finish on the beads. And I knit this as well because I was like, I'm going to keep making accessories for this wedding outfit so long as I have leftover yarn, and that was what I did. And this came in handy. I wore this so much constantly when we were in Canada. Just this little scrap of tiny mohair thing kept me so warm to have it on my neck and chest, or even pulled up over my hat as kind of like a second layer. Very beneficial. So I'm so glad I had it. I wore it on a glacier. I wore it at the wedding. Very happy with this. It came out very pretty. I quite enjoy knitting little lacy things like this. So that is the Ice Queen towel. This took me about a week to knit. I used a crochet hook to put the beads on, and yeah, it came out very pretty. The next thing I knit is probably my least favorite thing that I knit this year, and that is this Dark Side of the Moon, Dark Side of the Moon sweater by Regina Mossamer. This is knit with Knit Picks Gloss Fingering, which is a wool and silk, held together with Silky Kid mohair from Ella Rae. It's black, so my camera's not having it. This is the scratchiest mohair I've ever worked with in my life. It is just so scratchy, so it's not super enjoyable. I actually wound up purchasing a black turtleneck to wear underneath it because I just could not stand it. It is a funnel neck design, and it goes quite narrow over the shoulders, and is a little bit bell-shaped in the body, and ends, it is supposed to end with a rolled hem, but I just did a couple rows of garter stitch because the entire thing is reverse stockinette, so I just think garter stitch is a really nice finish there. So the two things that I don't like about this, one is, well, I guess three. One is the yarn. It's so scratchy. I don't like it. Two is kind of the fit. It is so tight over the shoulders. It's a little bit uncomfortable to wear. And the second thing about the fit is that it's a little short for me. And that is because I could swear I had 5 balls of finger weight yarn and 5 balls of mohair. And I did, but I could only find 4 balls of fingering because I had bought the Knit Picks gloss in the DK weight as well, and somehow one of my fingering weight balls got in the DK. So I was just looking at a bag of balls of black yarn and saying, nope, that's not it, but actually it wasn't there. So I could go back. I still have more mohair. I could go back and lengthen it, but it's a question of, do I even do that or not, because I hate the yarn. So I've worn it a couple times. It looks super cute with like a black bias skirt, but I have to wear it over a turtleneck, so I'm just not sure if I even want to just frog this and get the gloss out of it, or what I'm going to do with it. But yeah, my least favorite knit of the year. Followed by possibly one of my favorite knits of the year. This is the Sunshine Tee by Andrea Gogan Knits. And I knit this. This is my quickest knit of the year. I knit it in 9 days. I was traveling for work when I knit it, so I had a lot of time to myself without a toddler to knit it. So that is one reason that I went so fast. The other reason I went so fast is this yarn is just gorgeous. This is from the Bridgerton collection by Through the Wardrobe Yarn Company, and it is a fingering weight merino silk blend, and it is just scrumptious. I wish I bought, you know, millions of balls of this yarn. It's so pretty. This is the color I Burned For You, which is like a purple variegated yarn. And yeah, Sunshine Tee was so simple to knit up, very quick. I wound up a little bit tight on my gauge. My gauge was 30 stitches. I think the gauge she called for was 28. So I made a size 3, and I just love it. So easy to throw on. I'm definitely going to knit more of these because I quite enjoyed it. And the next thing I knit was also from that same yarn collection, from Through the Wardrobe Yarn Company, and the same yarn, but this color is called A Diamond of the First Water, and this is the Umbria Tee by Cookie the Knitter, and it is a little button-up t-shirt in a broken rib stitch. And I knit this in a little over 2 weeks. I have abalone buttons on it as well. Those are some of my favorite buttons. And yeah, same vein. Very cute, easy tee to throw on. I like the buttons. My secret when I make button-up tees like this that I don't ever intend to actually wear open or closed is I sew the button band closed, but I sew it closed on the inside edge of the button band. So it still kind of looks like it's a button band, but I have no gaping issues because it's sewn shut. So it's easy to throw on over my head. I don't have any problem with that. And yeah, very much like the yarn on this one. Easy pattern to wear. Super happy with it. After that, the next thing that I finished was using some of that leftover from that project. This is the Nutty Scarf by Lily Kate France, and this is the smaller version. I really like this. It's a very cute pattern. I really want to do the full length, the larger version in 2 colors, but my only thing about this is that I find the I-cord a little bit tight, so when I wear it, you can see it really likes to curl because the I-cord's a little tight. That could just be a me thing, and if and when I do knit it again, I'm going to pay careful attention to making the I-cord looser. But yeah, very cute little scarf. I do wear this sometimes, but I think I might get more wear out of a larger version or a version where the I-cord's not so tight. I finished this in about a day. It was a super quick knit, and just using that through the Wardrobe Yarn Co. leftovers. The summertime is when I got my Through the Wardrobe Yarn Company Bridgerton order, because the next item is also using Bridgerton yarn, and that is these Lupinit, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, socks by Suvi. I'm not going to attempt her last name, but her name is Suvi Knits on Ravelry. And when I first saw these socks, I said, if I were to knit socks again after I had sworn off knitting socks, these would be the socks that would do it. And then when I saw the Bridgerton collection, I just knew they were made for each other because they were so perfect and pretty and springy. So this is using several yarns from the Bridgerton collection. I got all fingering weight yarns, but I held them double in order to make the DK weight gauge of these socks. And I knit them about a week. I did them 2 at a time again. Went so fast. I loved the little... it's not even quite a bauble, but to make these flowers so pretty, and so that was really like cementing that love for socks that I'd have after knitting the pair for my friend, and I really flew into sock knitting after that. So after that, I had a trip for work upcoming to New York, and I kind of had in my mind this vision that I wanted some really cute little ankle socks to wear, because in the summertime I like wearing loafers, but really prefer to wear them with socks, especially walking around the city. So I had this vision for some ankle socks with a little frilly ruffle around them like they have for little girls. And I was like, I can knit them myself now. I've become a sock knitter. So I did, and that is this sock right here. This is knit in Patons Kroy. It's a little wrinkly because it went through the wash. But unfortunately, it went through the wash, and one of them was in a brown tight that I'd washed before, but it got dyed by the tight. You can see the color difference now. So I'm going to have to dye these socks because the color just totally transferred, and one of them is brown. But so happy with the sock. Actually wound up turning it into my first published knitting pattern. It is free on Ravelry if you'd like to check it out. So I named these the Nita sock. And after I finished those, I knit a second pair because I made some, a couple changes to the pattern. And this was the second pair that I knit in pink. This is called Beartooth High Twist from Linares Yarn Company. This is a really cool yarn because it's 100% non-superwash Polwarth, I think, wool. And they make it, it's 4 ply, and one of the plies is twisted the opposite direction, so when they get plied together, that single ply gets tighter than the rest, and that provides some extra strength to the yarn that you would normally get from nylon. So I thought that was really super interesting. It gives it a very subtle, marled effect to the yarn because that tighter twist doesn't get dyed quite as deeply as everything else. So really love this yarn. Definitely want to use it again for sock knitting, and this was my second sample of the sock pattern that I made. So finishing out my kind of summer early fall knits was just this quick hat that I knit with some Malabrigo one-off mistake skeins that I had gotten from Jimmy Bean's Wool. I knit this a day before we left for Canada. This is the Lil Pumpkin hat, which is definitely achievable in a day. I've knit it in a day before for my toddler, and now I knit it for myself in this Malabrigo. I just had that premonition that I was going to be colder than I thought I would be in Canada, and I was, so I'm glad that I had this hat. And I just cranked it out in a day right before we left and had it with me for the trip. So the next item that I finished, I started in August and finished in September, and that is the Holly sweater from Knitting for Olive. This was actually the second one that I started, but the first one that I finished. This one is for me. I wanted to knit us matching family Holly sweaters this year, so I knit them for myself, my husband, and our toddler, and I didn't want to do fingering and mohair for all of them, which is what is called for, because my husband just wouldn't be a fan of that fabric, and he specifically wanted something he did not have to worry about in the laundry. So I wanted it to be super washed, and I personally was looking for a cotton blend, so it wouldn't be too hot because we do live in North Carolina. And then I was looking for a sport to DK weight, DK to match the gauge of the pattern, but I also prefer lighter sweaters, so I was happy to make adjustments to gauge for sport weight as well. So I wound up finding this sport weight yarn from a company called Llamas Alpaca in Spain, and this is called Baby Organic, and it is 50-50 cotton superwash merino. And so that's what I used for the body of the sweater. I did order some green and red from them, but it came too light, so I wound up just using some Malabrigo Rios for the color work. And my gauge was a lot tighter than the gauge for the pattern, so I wound up doing all kinds of math to resize these to fit us, and I put my swatch through the washer and dryer, and it shrank a ton in length, so I had to do constant calculations for how many more rows do I need to do in the arms and the body, and I am happy to say they came out fitting very well out of the dryer, so very cute. This is mine that I finished about a month. My husband's is the one that took me the longest, 8 months. Oh boy, I offered to take the Holly pattern and put it like straight across the chest on a traditional men's pattern. And he said, no, I want to match you and baby. If you guys have it around your shoulders, I want it around my shoulders too. And I said, okay, I'll do it. But this is really a women's pattern. And the first time I got past the split for arms, I put it on him, and it was just awful. There was way too much fabric around the lower chest. And it's just a matter of the way that men's and women's bodies can be shaped differently. His width all comes really in the shoulders, and then he didn't need as much because he doesn't over his chest, and so I wound up ripping back all the way to the motif, and then not doing any more increases after the yoke motif ends. And then I went and I knit like most of the sleeve, and I tried it on him, and the sleeve was way too tight. And so then I had to rip the sleeve all the way back and knit it again, doing less decreases. So I ripped back like 4 balls of yarn on this one, which was a lot. So that's why it took me so long. It really killed my motivation a lot of the time working on it. So I finished it after I finished mine, but I did eventually finish it. It does fit him pretty well. He would prefer the sleeves and body a little bit longer, he said, so I do have more yarn. And since it's top down, I can easily go back and add a little bit of length. He wants like another inch in the sleeves just so that they don't ride up as much when he moves his arms, and another inch or 2 in the body so that it stays down more when he bends over. But I have like 3 more balls of this yarn, so I can do that for him. You can see his is more tan and mine is like more pinky gray. And then baby's is a pure gray. So this is baby's. It fit great, definitely oversized, so should fit again next year. I might have to add length, I might not, but everyone was so pleased by our matching sweaters and thought that they were really cute. So this was the last item that I finished in December this year. In the middle of knitting all of these, I did knit one more thing for my toddler, and that is this little vest. This took me about 3 weeks to finish, and it is my own design. This is using a boucle yarn called Woolfolk Flet Bulky. They have 2 boucle yarns, but this is the bulky version. And I bought this yarn on a vacation that I went on this year, knowing that I wanted to turn it into a little plaid vest for our toddler, and that's what I did. So this is a slip stitch garter pattern that I kind of came up with, and then I took the gauge, wrote the pattern, did an I-cord finish over a zipper, And yeah, just thought it came out so cute. Kind of want one for myself. Barely touched into like half of the 3 balls of yarn that I had for this. But to make one for myself would be a lot of yarn, and this yarn was pretty expensive. So I don't know if that will happen. Maybe if I do a proposal and get them to sponsor me. But the yarn is so soft and so warm. I'm definitely a little bit obsessed with boucle fabric, even though I did not enjoy knitting it because it was just so hard to see my stitches. So that was everything that I knit in 2024. Lots to look forward to in knitting 2025. I have lots of plans, of course. We'll see whether or not they all come to fruition. But thanks for watching what I had to share. We'll see if I even post this, but I just thought it would be something fun to do. So thanks.